Hi, folks. My name is Dalton Mortimer, and I am the Authenticator. And I've been thinking about something in the back of my mind for a while now, and I think it's finally time for me to elucidate some of it. For those that don't know, I have been a practicing occultist for almost 19 years now, and as a practicing occultist who is very much anti-social justice and anti-woke and anti um, postmodern deconstruction and the Frankfurt School and especially neo-Hegelianism, I hate, and most people who know me know how much I hate the feminist co-opting of magic, occultism, and in particular witchcraft. We've all seen the memes. We've all seen the "we are the descendants of the witches you couldn't burn," blah 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 blah, and we've all seen the witch trials were just a patriarchal, were just are example of patriarchal tyranny, blah 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 blah. But speaking for myself as someone who is very much anti-social justice, anti-woke, anti-neo-Hegelian redefinition, even to a large extent anti-Jungian redefinition of archetypes and shit, it has always bothered me that feminists use witchcraft as essentially a political floor show instead of actually, believing in it, because of course sincere belief is synonymous with meritocracy, and meritocracy is, according to feminists, just a harmful delusion we have to wake people up from, etc. But I was having a hard time putting succinctly, apart from the, ranting and raving about how they do not understand how magic actually functions, and they don't take it seriously enough to make it work, even if they did. So there's that. But what about the political or like metaphysical side of it? What about the like principles and so on? Aside from the practical matter of feminists are generally sucky at witchcraft, just like they suck at everything else, because they view getting good at something as some sort of oppressive patriarchal standard. Apart from that, though, something that's bothered me in the back of my mind for a while that I didn't really have words for until a couple days ago, comes down to this. Feminists like seeing themselves as witches because the witch is an anti-establishment, transgressive symbol of rebellion against various different forms of orthodoxy. That's why they love to call themselves witches. But the problem there is they can't actually embrace what the witch is. Because, ironically, the witch, at least in the archetypical sense, is a very feminine figure. In particular, and this is where the title of the video comes in, they love to say, "Oh, I worship Hecate," or "Oh, I worship the divine feminine," or the mother goddess, etc. They love to say, "We worship the fates, we worship the three-in-one," etc. But they hate, with a passion, the concept of the three things most typically associated with the fates, the Hecate, the three-in-one, etc., which is the mother, the maiden, and the crone. And therein lies the impetus behind this video. Let's go through the sets here. What is the maiden? The maiden's virtues typically, and again, I realize I kind of hate myself for going all but my themes and my archetypes on this, because as previously stated, I can't stand when people see things in a metaphorical sense as opposed to a literal sense for the most part, especially when there are far more intelligent conversations to be had about the straightforward in-universe logic interpretation of shit. But what I can do is call them out for hypocrisy and use their own standards against them, and therein lies what I'm doing here. The maiden, typically, the virtues of the maiden, typically relate to innocence, kindness, purity of heart or purity of mind, and virginity. But feminists hate all of those, at least on a practical level. feminists don't like the idea of women being virgins because women are supposed to be sexually liberated. They don't like young women being innocent because you're not supposed to blindly go along with what the quote-unquote patriarchy wants. You're supposed to be self-aware and able to oppose, in a rebellious sense, the patriarchy, quote-unquote. And typically in the Mother Maiden Crone formulation, the innocence and purity and kindness of the maiden grows into the nurturing, sheltering beneficence and the maternal instincts of the mother. But they don't like the mother either, because they consider the stay-at-home mother role to be the quintessential handmaiden of the patriarchy post, etc. They don't like the idea of women being seen as nurturers, because that, to them, that's seen as a servile slavery post. They don't like the idea of women being defined in any meaningful way by themselves giving birth. And so they reject the maiden's innocence, purity, and naivete and kindness in favor of a wiser than her. Actually, I will come back to this point in a minute. Actually, because I have another point I want to make with regards to this. Once we've gone through all the sets here, the mother is the nurturer, the homemaker, the giver of life to the new generations, and particularly a protector and nurturer of children, which a lot of feminists are, of course, anti-natalist to begin with. And they often consider motherhood to be a kind of indentured servitude at best, outright slavery, or outright handmaid's tale status at worst. And then, of course, you have the crone, the wizened woman, the woman who has gone through the purity and kindness of the maiden, whose kindness has been transmuted into the nurturing instincts of the mother. And then, of course, the crone is the wisdom that comes with growing old with grace. But feminists don't particularly like that either, because they are the first to use things like plastic surgery, beauty treatments, etc., to do literally anything but let themselves age naturally, because they consider the idea of aging, into one's own maturity, to almost be anathema to their self-actualization or their desire to basically do whatever they want on a whim. Not to mention, older feminists in particular often find themselves with a very empty personal life, because they didn't have kids when they were in their mother phase, and so they now no longer have kids or grandkids to keep them company in their old age. And very often, elderly career women will try to cover for this by engaging in plastic surgery to bring back their youth, or throwing themselves whole hog into hookup culture and trying to basically hedonist the pain and emptiness of being a crone without any of the virtues or positive properties of the crone. They don't want that to hit them, so they try to bury it in hedonism. But okay, so we've gone through roughly the virtues of the mother, or rather the maiden, the mother, and the crone, respectively. And we've seen, or at least I've alluded to, ways in which the feminist ideas are anathema to it. They don't want young women to be innocent or pure, and certainly not virginal. They want something else. They don't want the mother to be nurturing, caregiving, and certainly not related to the prospect of stay-at-home motherhood or giving birth to children. And they do not like aging, and thus almost entirely reject the crone. So what is the feminist equivalent then? if we can definitively say, and I feel like we can fairly definitively say, all of the traditional values of the Maiden, the Mother, and the Crone are anathema to most feminists. So let's look at what the feminist equivalent would be, I suppose. What do feminists find virtuous about the youthful Maiden? I put it to you that their version of the Maiden is a world-weary, cynical rebel. Someone like Daria Morgendorffer from Daria, or Sam Manson from Danny Phantom, or Wednesday Addams, either from the Barry Sonnenfeld movies or from the Netflix series. The idea of the feminist idea of youth is someone who is quote unquote wise beyond her years and sees through society's bullshit and willfully rebels against it. Okay, so we have. I feel safe in assuming everyone is on the same page with me with regards to this. So, the feminist maiden, if you like, is the world-weary, cynical person who sees beyond all illusions, all institutions, all established orders, etc. The feminist equivalent of the mother, bearing in mind that, again, a lot of feminists are explicitly anti-natalist and consider the idea of stay-at-home motherhood to be oppressive. The feminist equivalent of the mother is the career woman. Your Cruella de Vil's, your Miranda Priestley's, your Hillary Clinton's, and so forth. And that appears to be the trajectory of the feminist feminine archetype, I suppose. The cynical, wise beyond her years, capable of seeing through shit that society forces on her, young girl who goes through her activist and rebel phase, eventually rises through the ranks and becomes a CEO or a well-respected writer or a journalist or so on. And then we come to the feminist equivalent of the crone, which, apart from the woman trying to keep her youth intact via plastic surgery and via all sorts of other beauty treatments and so on, I think the closest thing to a crone you get within feminist cosmology would be the midlife crisis arc. Like, think of movies like How Stella Got Her Groove Back, or 27 Dresses, or Eat, Pray, Love, or When in Rome. There's a lot of these. There's a lot of the rom-com type things that focus on a woman who's either going through or about to go through menopause, for lack of a better phrase, and she recaptures her youth and her power and her vitality by either finding the man she's always wanted or getting that big career boost that she always wanted but couldn't get because she got stuck in middle management, or simply just quote unquote finding herself, a la the midlife crisis. So the traditional outgrowth of the maiden mother crone is the maiden is innocent, pure, and virginal, and her kindness and goodness develop slowly but surely into the nurturing properties of the mother, where then she gives birth to someone, hopefully, after she finds someone who loves her and who she loves in return, and then she dotes and nurtures on the next generation or on her family and becomes a respected matriarch, and slowly that respected matriarch evolves into the crone, the woman who has been through life and therefore gained wisdom by it, usually even in the sense of uncomfortable knowledge that life has given her through hardship and so on, hence why the crone is also a very dark and feared figure. The feminist equivalent appears to be the cynical, world-weary, beyond her years, and quote-unquote wise beyond her years, professional rebel and activist, rebels against the system and perfects it, and then after she has fixed the system, or at least attempted to fix the system, she evolves into the middle-aged career woman, who is the CEO, the professional journalist, the professional author, what have you, the achiever of some kind of professional status goal. And then the aging of the career woman eventually becomes, I have to get back in touch with myself. I've been too much buried under all the weight of the responsibility that I took on as the career woman, and so must reawaken myself, or find that part of myself that I was always missing, and so on. Now, mind you, again, this is very rare to actually happen in real life, because typically, even if you can manage to become the girl boss career woman type, you usually don't get the youthful Giga Chad lover, or the trip around the world to rediscover yourself, and so on, typically. But this appears to be the closest analogy we have to the feminist equivalent of the mother Maiden Crone. The cynical, wise beyond her years child becomes an activist. Then that activist eventually either sells out to the establishment, or reforms the establishment and takes her place as the head of it and becomes the career woman. And then the career woman, in her old age, feels the need to reinvent and revitalize herself because, well, she didn't go in for all of the quote-unquote oppressive patriarchal ways in which women usually stave off the horrors of their own aging by, having a family or friends or something like that to look forward to or to associate with. And so she has to go on a midlife crisis style journey, and only after that is done is she a fully realized person. Now, mind you, here's another parallel between the traditional Mother Maiden Crone and the feminist Mother Maiden Crone, I suppose, or I guess activist career woman acolyte, I guess is the best way of putting it, or activist, acolyte, and self-help guru might be a good way of formulating it. In each of the more traditional stations of the Maiden, Mother, and Crone, each of them is self-actualized in their own way. The Maiden's innocence and her ability to imagine wonders is her power and her source of ambition to finding what she wants out of life. The mother's nurturing allows her to become wizened by the experiences of being a mother, and which then leads to the crone, who has both the light and dark aspects of aging that she can employ, and therefore can be a mistress of mysteries, hence why the crone is always both feared and respected. But with the feminist equivalent, the activist career woman self-help guru track, none of these is particularly self-actualized or well-rounded. The activist maiden is apparently, according to this cosmology, wise beyond her years and therefore intrinsically cynical. But anyone who's seen Daria or Danny Phantom or any of the other numerous examples of this trope usually knows that the activist maiden is typically very depressed, or at least very world weary and very very not okay with the way things are, hence why she becomes an activist or a rebel in order to change them. Another great example of this would be Delia Deetz from Beetlejuice. She is, you know, young, she's got her whole life ahead of her and everything to look forward to, but we are first introduced to Delia unsatisfied with life and on the cusp of committing suicide. Raven from Teen Titans is another good example. And by the way, I am not by employing these characters suggesting that there is anything wrong with these characters. I love Daria and I love Raven and I like Delia and so on. My issue is demonstrating, for the sake of the argument, that not only do feminists reject the mother, the maiden, and the crone, despite their want to be witches, they have full stop replaced in their personal cosmologies the mother, the maiden, and the crone with the activist, the career woman, and the self-help guru, or retiree, I guess, would be another way of putting their version of a crone. The woman who retires and goes on vacation and finds herself, quote unquote, and becomes self-actualized in that way. But point being, what I was getting to earlier, it's noteworthy that none of the feminist equivalents of the mother, the maiden, and the crone are in any way really self-actualized. The activist frequently winds up having to submit to the very establishment that she was rebelling against, either because she couldn't change them or because the changes she made didn't go far enough. Hence why the career woman is usually blinding herself with her own ambition, but typically finds that she's miserable at the end of it, thus necessitating the attempt to find herself in either a sabbatical or retiree post. But yeah, even in their own cosmology, only the crone equivalent, only the retiree or self-help guru phase is particularly self-actualized, and only after she goes through her midlife crisis arc. Compare that to the maiden, the mother, and the crone, and you notice the maiden has the power of dreaming her future into existence. The mother has the power of creating life and acquiring wisdom, which said wisdom is then used and magnified by the powers of the crone and the things that the crone has learned along the way in the process of becoming the crone. So even in their own cosmology, each of these quasi-archetypes, the activist, the career woman, and the retiree, you don't really get a fully actualized or fully powerful feminine character until you get to the end. Which I guess is somewhat true in that, both the maiden and the mother are subordinated to the power of the crone, and that's why the crone is considered so dangerous. But note that, at least in the original formulation, the maiden has a power that is uniquely hers, the mother has a power that is uniquely hers, and the crone's power is magnified because she has all the virtues of the other two and then some. But this fundamentally goes back to, this is why feminists, I think, despite wanting to be witches as much as they do, will always suck at it. Because if we're going the Gerald Gardner approach, or the revisionist history Jungian approach, or the sort of modern New Age witchcraft approach, the triple goddess or the mother goddess is typified by the three-formed Hecate, the mother, the maiden, and the crone, and they don't like it, so they replaced it with something else. But that something else has no connection to the forces of nature or the spiritual world that the mother, the maiden, and the crone always have. So food for thought, the next time you're wondering what in the fuck feminist witches are smoking, yeah, they suck at it, and they suck at it not just for practical reasons, although they do suck at it for practical reasons, but they also suck at it for paradigm reasons. They reject the Mother, the Maiden, and the Crone, so they don't have the power of the Mother, the Maiden, or the Crone. I will see you all in the next one. Cheers, guys. That's my piece.